So with Facebook fight pages, is there really actually anything that can be done to stop them popping up?
No, not to stop them actually being activated or created, because most of, and using Facebook obviously because it's the largest social networking site out there, as an example, it's all automated. So any Facebook page that's created initially will never actually be looked at by a physical person. So it's almost impossible to stop them being created, and it's usually anywhere between a couple of days or even sometimes weeks before they're even seen or even identified by a physical person working at Facebook.
So it's a different process between identifying fight videos and photographs of fighting as opposed to, say, nudity, which we see a lot of complaints about women having their breastfeeding photos taken down because it contravenes nudity.
Yep. What a lot of people don't know is Facebook have a little piece of software on their network that any nudity or any sexual sort of movement or imagery actually goes through just this piece of software, and it'll get identified by a number of algorithms or just scripts and the way that program is written, and it'll be pulled out or identified by the software and then sent through to a moderator. Now they'll look at those images or that video, and they'll make a decision, or a physical person make a decision in regards to whether it's appropriate. It could be just someone at a beach in their underwear or bikini, so they'll allow that through. But if it's sexual nudity and as you allude to, the breastfeeding, then they might say, well, we don't think that's appropriate, it's in breach of our policy, so we won't allow it on our site. But with our fighting videos, there's nothing within that sort of software or within those guidelines that really breach those specific policies. So this is why a lot of these videos are getting on, and why, as I said, you might get parents complain or schools complain to Facebook, and it's not until a number of days later that they may actually get removed.
So it requires a critical mass to get these sort of pages in front of the moderators.
Yeah, it's anywhere, I think, over 21 reports or blocks before someone at Facebook will actually look at it. Now, I mean, there's almost 2 billion people actually using the network at the moment on Facebook, and there's only 4,500 people who actually work at Facebook, and that's a remarkable amount of people considering how many people are using the network compared to how few people work there. So, and obviously the marketing and how much money's pumped in and through the network, it wouldn't be that many people who are actually working on moderation of the site. So the chances of a fight page or something that's not really looked upon as kosher, I suppose, by the general population, it could take quite a while, if not never, to actually been seen by a moderator and removed. That's where it gets very frustrating, especially for parents and schools, that it almost appears like nothing's being done when it just can't be, because of the mass that's coming through that network.
Does it surprise you that the Perth Fights Facebook page has just resurfaced as is after being dumped in as its original form, and then we saw it come back as Perth Fights 2.0? Are you actually surprised it's just come back as original?
No, not really. It's and again, it's got to go through all that process again now. So there would have been a number of complaints about the page that finally would have got to a moderator at Facebook. They would have assessed it, deemed it to probably be inappropriate and removed it, but that could have taken anywhere between, I don't know, 3 or 4 days right up to a couple of weeks. So whereas it's very easy to create a page, that can be done in only a few minutes. So now it's got to go through that entire process again. People sort of assume, well, I've already reported on that page, but they can't get caught up in the mistaken belief that, hold on, this is now a completely different entity. It's a new entity now, so you've got to go through the whole process again. And this is where people get quite frustrated with Facebook in regards to, well, if I did it last time, why do I have to do it again? But unfortunately, the way it's designed, this is what you've got to do. You've just got to keep hammering these pages, and it's frustrating because we used to do the same when I was working at at the police up at Technology Crime, and no sooner you close one page down, that especially bullying pages and stuff like that, vilification pages, and the next day, literally, it's a new one. You've got to go through that whole process again. It's very frustrating.
Well, talk about the content and the way it's displayed. I mean, a lot of people just ring up and say, oh, look, it's just harmless scrapping between, two kids in the playground. Is there anything really wrong with that? But the images and videos show clearly outnumbered beatings, and they show fights happening within shopping centres. What would your argument to the people who say, oh, just leave it alone, it's just kids having a bit of a scrap?
And this is where it gets very difficult as well. And we look at the corporate side of things, or we look at the, not so much the right to know, but in the US, obviously, where Facebook is run, they have a very liberal freedom of information laws, and they're very protective of the information they're sharing. And even though these pages may be being posted in Australia, the governance on those laws are still working within the US. So they're very protective of what they put on and the right for people to know or to see. And as a result of that, they have some very strict guidelines that they adhere to, and that works both ways in the regards. And we talk about the breastfeeding. They'll say, well, no, that can't go on. Yet they're happy to throw on a fights page, but they look at it quite differently in the fact that, well, it's just a fight. It doesn't appear that anyone's been seriously injured, so they'll look at it in that way that, yes, if they're underage, they might make consideration there in removing it, but then their argument will also be, well, hold on, we've got a whole pile of UFC fighting, we've got a whole pile of kickboxing and martial arts on Facebook, so what's the difference? And they believe that argument's justified to a degree.
But there's clearly a difference between an organised event such as UFC or boxing, and kids ganging up and beating on one particular child and then posting that on the internet.
Yeah, but again, they fall on the moral obligation, I suppose, to the people to post and to record, and almost hoping to a degree, I'd expect that avenues or things are being put in place at where that video may have been taken or with those particular people, that efforts have been made for their welfare and all that sort of stuff. So their main concern is the fact that, okay, well, if someone's prepared to post this, then as long as it doesn't breach our guidelines, then we're okay with it being displayed. So this is where, again, we come into the sort of the moral side of things, where you'd think it'd be inappropriate, but again, it's just a matter of trying to identify who governs, I suppose, that morality in regards to who makes those decisions. And this is, again, where most of the frustration comes in, is people assume that a person at Facebook looks at everything, every video, every photo, every post, but it just doesn't happen that way. So even though the site itself may appear to be acting immorally because they're being posted, it doesn't necessarily mean that that those particular videos have actually been physically seen by a person. And we need to remember that, because it's quite important at how the network actually works and how a lot of the stuff goes on that may never actually ever been seen.
Well, I'll ask you to put your police hat on again for just a moment. After 20 years in the force and 5 dealing with these sort of issues.
Yep.
What is the criminality? Is there any potential criminality that can come from, firstly, the material that is shown, i.e. can kids be charged with fighting and causing public disturbance? And is there any potential for a criminal charge against the person who is aggregating all these videos together?
No. I mean, we've got to, especially if it's in the public domain. Any person can film anything in public, as long as it's obviously not a private act in regards to obviously people having showers at public change rooms and all that sort of stuff. I mean, of course, that speaks for itself. But if there's a fight at a local shopping centre, a young fella decides to film it, and he thinks that's cool and he whacks it on Facebook, then there's no level at all there in any act to sort of have them charged. as far as the kids go, or the people who are fighting, then yeah, we can look at nothing to do with technology-related crime, but you've got to look at local crime or local acts in regards to fighting in public and disorderly conduct and all that sort of stuff. But no, unfortunately there's very limited legislation, and this is one of the big frustrations in the time that I was a police officer at Tech Crime. There's very limited legislation that is available to police in regards to these sort of peripheral incidents, if you get what I mean, Paul. So it's very frustrating because...
but what about, sorry to interrupt you, Paul, but what about failure to report a crime?
Well, we don't really have that type of legislation to cover those particular incidents. And again, it's really those sort of situations where it's the most sort of serious crimes where people have an obligation to report, especially once they've known a crime has been committed. The problem we have with a lot of these fights videos is a lot of the kids just, they're unaware that it may be a crime or it may be an offence to fight like this in public, and so it's really difficult to sort of put that onus back on them to report when they don't believe they've an offence has actually been committed. So yeah, it's very hard to sort of jump up and down on that sort of legislation, unfortunately. Facebook is a very frustrating site, just the way that it's been designed. It's a networking marvel. I wish I'd thought of it, but because I'd be a billionaire. But as a result of that, it's just turned into a massive giant, and our, especially our teens, they just don't realise how much of an impact it does have or can have on their world, and something as simple as filming a fight just has huge ramifications, especially if one of the kids who's fighting has been seriously hurt or is a victim of bullying or something like that. Just the ramifications for the family and friends and peers, it's just horrible to see. So but I can't see it ever stopping, unfortunately, and that's a horrible thing to say, but until our networks start taking a bit more responsibility in regards to the content that's on these sites, which I can't see happening in the near future, realistically, schools, parents, legislators, police, you're going to be bashing your head up against a brick wall, and until that changes, there's really not much, unfortunately, many people can do.